Hello everyone and welcome to Automation Recipes. This is the third part about the IBM RPA Studio Recorder. In the previous two parts, we went through some of the basic and a little bit more advanced features of the recorder using a demo application. On this last part, we're going to try to automate an application more similar to what you would see in real life. This is an HR application with several features. For this session, we're going to try the basic employee registration. We're going to try to automate that process using this application. And while we do it, we'll go through some common troubleshooting that is usually necessary to automate real-life applications, as well as discuss a little bit more about some of the RPA recorder features. Now, first things first, if we go into the studio, we can see that I have a wait for window to appear command. This application takes a little bit long to launch. The loading is a little long. So what I did here basically is I'm going to leave the application open and I'm going to use the wait for window to appear command to detect the already opened window so that the bot can interact with that window. Alright, so let's start the recorder. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to click on this new employee button. So as always, I'll map it using the Ctrl key. And now that I have it mapped, I'll try to click on it by going to Actions, Click, and I'll leave it on Auto Suggest. Now, this click should open up a new window on the application. As always, the recorder has already input all the information necessary to identify the button, and it indeed has clicked on the button and opened up a new window. Before we proceed, let's test it out. So let's close everything, leave the application window here open, and click on Start to see if the bot can actually click on that button. So here we have a little error, control not found. And we can see here that it didn't find the control by trying to find this ID here, bar button item link 7. So let's close the debugging, go back to the application, and we see here the button. Let's start the recorder and map it again. So basically what the bot said to us the last time we debugged it is that it couldn't find the button by trying to find it through its ID. So let's try something a little different. Let's go to Actions, Click, and this time we're actually going to choose XPath on purpose. And here we can see the XPath leading to that button. Let's click on Save. And that command has already been added to our script. Let's close this window here and go back to the studio. And we can see that the second click command using now the XPath. So now we have the second click command here using the XPath and the last click command using the ID. We're going to comment out this first command and just use the second click command to try to click on that button. So let's go ahead and try that. So it went by very fast, but you can see that the click did work. If we go back here to the application, we can see that the new window is opened up. So the bot did manage to click on the new employee button. But why did it manage to click using the XPath and not the ID? Well, let's try to figure that out. Once again, we're going to go back to the studio and start the recorder. And we're going to map this button once more. And now we're going to take a look at it in the element tree view. On our last session, I showed you the element tree view and properties view. As you remember, this window contains a tree of all the elements that compose the application to the left and all the properties of that element, of each of those elements, to the right. You may notice that the button is this one, right? If we highlight it, we can see the button here, new employee. But you may notice that the ID is different. Here it says bar button item link 2. If you go back to the studio, we can see that the ID was bar button item link 7. Let's try uncommenting that command to see the ID here. And as you can see, we can confirm that the ID is different. So how come? Why is that? You see, every application is developed in a different way. And depending on how the application is developed, you may have a little difficulty in interacting with some elements using IDs. Ideally, you want to use IDs as your first option, as they are normally the quickest way around the application. However, in this instance, we can see that the ID of these elements is actually dynamic. The first time we mapped that button, the ID was bar button item link 7. But as we saw, now the ID has changed. It's now bar button item link 2. In these situations, you would rather go with XPath every time. If an application uses dynamic IDs, and this is entirely dependent on how the application was developed, you definitely don't want to be using IDs to be identifying elements. So in this case, always go by XPath. XPath is normally the most accurate way to identify elements in an application, but it tends to make the automation a little bit slower as the bot has to go through the tree to find an element using the XPath. Using IDs, the bot can normally find those elements faster. However, that's not always possible. So in this case, in this application, from now on, now that we know that those IDs are dynamic, from now on, we will always use XPath to automate, to identify every single element we try to interact with. All right, so we did manage to click on that button. So we don't need this click button anymore. We'll just delete that because it's using an ID and we can't use IDs. IDs are not reliable to automate this application specifically. So let's click on that button manually so we can open the new window. Now, as you can see, when you click on the new employee button, it does indeed open a new window. In this case, what it means is that I need to change the context of the execution to the new window. Just reinforcing the concept of execution context. When you attach a window, an application window to the bot execution context, the bot is going to be paying attention to that window specifically to find the elements and interact with the application. If you want to switch to a new window, in this case, a new window actually appears when you click a button. First, before trying to interact with any elements in the window, we actually have to map the window itself. So let's try mapping the window title bar. And from here, we're going to go to Window, wait for window to appear. On the wait for window to appear command, since we mapped the window, all the elements, all the parameters to identify the window have already been filled in by the recorder. We're just going to go ahead and put this window on a variable. I'm going to name this variable employee window. When you store a window in a variable, you can switch between the windows in a context more efficiently. Instead of actually having to wait for the window to appear again, you can just use the attach window command by using that variable. So you can switch between windows during the execution. You can switch between the windows that the bot is looking at during the execution. You can see here that I actually have two window variables. The app window, which is the main window of that application. And now I have the employee window, which is the window for that specific part of the application, the new employee register window. We don't need to use this command for now, so let's go back to the application. And for now, let's try doing the very minimum necessary so we don't waste time. We're going to try to fill out first name, last name, title, mobile phone, email, and department. This is the very minimal information that we need in order to register a new employee correctly. So now that we have this new window mapped, let's try interacting with some of these fields. Let's map the first name field and try to set a value here. Remember that IDs are not reliable for this application, so let's go ahead and use XPath. And we're going to go with John for the first name. All right, so the information is there. Let's try testing this to see if it actually works. So let's close this window, close the recorder, and run the bot. Okay, so we did click and on the button, the new window has showed up. Let's see if it finds the field. So here we have an error. It doesn't find the field. If we take a look at this with the recorder, let's leave this window open, start the recorder, let's stop the execution, start the recorder, and map the field again. We can see that the XPath is correct. If we compare this to what is in the command, we can see that it's the exact same. So what exactly is going on? Why didn't it find that field? Turns out what happens is that the bot was not able to identify the window correctly. And the reason for that is if we go back here for the wait for window to appear, we can see that we, besides the title bar, the title of the window, we also have a class name and a process name for that window. Now, the recorder input this information, all this information, right? The recorder inputs as much information as possible when you're using it. But sometimes that information can actually be disruptive. For the wait for window to appear command, preferably what you want is to search for the window only by using the title. If we search it by using process name and class name, the bot may get confused because processes sometimes are duplicated. So the process that we had here is DevExpress Outlook Inspired F.wpf. The problem is that this process is the same for all the windows in that application. So all the sub-windows still use the same process. When the bot tries to find a new window by using that process as a parameter to find the window, it's going to find the first window and the second window have the same exact process name. And the bot will get confused about which window you were referring to, even if you use the title as a way to differentiate between them. So ideally what you want here is to use only the title of the window to identify it. If we remove the class name and the process name and save this command, now we go back to the application, close the window, and run the bot again. You see that the only change I made was deleting the class name and the process name. So we run this bot again, exactly as it is now. So it's going to manage to click on the new employee button and input John in the new window. So you see, a simple change like that was enough for the bot to identify the window correctly. So these two problems that we solved with the clicking through XPath and not ID, and identifying the window only using its name, its title, not the class name or the process name. How did I find out about these issues? How did I find out that these are what I needed to do to correctly automate this application? Well, mostly trial and error. And this is what I mean when I say that when you are trying to automate an application, it is mostly a process of trial and error. You want to try different types of things in order to find out what works best. That, and also having a keen knowledge on how IBM RPA works, how RPA works in general really, how to automate applications. Developing automation is a skill as any other sort of programming or technology or mathematical skill. It is mostly a matter of dealing with on a daily basis and learning the ins and outs and the little intricacies of how to execute processes correctly. Let's try to input information on the remaining fields. We're going to try to do the bare minimum here to register a new employee. So let's open the recorder again and try to map the remaining fields. As always, we're going to be using XPath, as we already found out that this application is not reliable using IDs. We're going to go with Smith for the last name. For title, we're going to go with consultant. For mobile phone, we're just going to input a random phone number here. Actually, just any random number, really. And on email, we're going to go with John_Smith at IBM.com. So let's see if the bot can input information on all these fields. Let's close this window again. No saving changes. And let's run the bot as is. So the bot managed to insert information on all the fields we needed. The next part we need to deal with is this department combo box here. We need to choose a department for this employee. So let's open the recorder again, map this combo box. And as you remember, the last time we used, for the combo boxes, we used the set value command. We're going to go with XPath. And we're going to go with IT. Yeah, let's choose IT. This is going to be an IT consultant. So you'll see IT is one of the options here. So let's close this and see if it can input the information, if it can choose the IT option in the combo box correctly. Let's close the recorder and start. So as you can see, we got another error. Could not set value IT in combo box. And then it shows available options. Now, normally, when you would get this error, it means that you chose the wrong option. The option that you chose to pick on the combo box doesn't exist. And then it would show you a list of all the options available in that combo box so you can choose the correct option. In this case, you can see that there are no options here. The bot cannot find any options in this combo box. Let's go back and open the recorder again. Let's stop the execution. Start the recorder, and go back to the application and map this combo box once more. If you go here to the tree view of that combo box, we see that it is indeed a combo box. It is identified. The element is identified as a combo box, but for some reason the bot cannot find any options inside this combo box. It's as if the combo box is empty. Why that is? Well, I really couldn't tell. It's mostly how the application was developed. As you remember, our last application, the one that we were using, was a demo application. So it was developed in a very clean and organized way. Every single element, every single combo box, select box, all of those elements were really well organized. So the bot could find them, the options in those elements, the bot could interact with those elements really easily. In this application, however it is that they developed it, however it is in the backend, these options just do not show up on the backend. The bot cannot find these options using the backend API. So in a case like this, where we can't really assure what options are in the combo box, the bot can't find any options in the combo box, and we need to choose one of these options. What can we do? Well, if we take a look at the set value command, we can see that we have a few more parameters here that we never used before. One of them is the value type, the set algorithm, and the match condition. Well, the match condition is really self-explanatory. Equal to means that you want to choose an option that is exactly equal to the one that you were typing here. So the option has to be exactly the same. You can choose different algorithms like contains or begins with. Equal to is normally the most accurate one. Now, what you want to experiment with is the value type and the set algorithm. Now, for the value type, normally we always leave it on automatically, and that normally works, but sometimes we need to change that a bit. For instance, we could try to find the option inside the combo box using the index of the combo box. And the index is exactly that, the index of the option inside the combo box, from 1 to whatever it is. So for instance, in this combo box, the IT option is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's the 7th option in the combo box. So it would be ID 7, right? Well, it doesn't really work that way this time because it doesn't really matter, right? The bot cannot find any options in the combo box regardless. So using indexes in this case would not make any difference. If you were to use index, you would have to put index here and use the option 7, for instance. Some combo boxes are also inverted. The options are actually 1 through 7 from down to the top. So sometimes IT would be option number 1 and sales will be option number 7, right? That's very common. What you would want in this case, as the bot cannot find any option inside the combo box either way for however it is developed, whatever they did during development, the bot cannot find those options there. What you want to do is leave it as text specifically. We're going to type IT here again, and we want to mess around with the set algorithm. The set algorithm normally is default, which is basically the bot goes to the back end of the application and it chooses the option from the back end. But we also have the option to focus and type, which In this option, the bot basically simulates a human clicking on the field, typing the option they wanted, and then leaving the field in order to choose that option. So if you use focus and type here and use save, we can see if that works, but it would basically be the bot doing this. A person clicking on the field, typing IT, and then clicking outside. This is what the bot's going to try to find. It's going to try to simulate, right? So let's see if the bot can manage to choose the option here this time. Let's close this window. Don't want to save any changes. Don't want to close the recorder as well. The set value command, the value type is text, and the set algorithm is focus and type. So let's save and start. So we managed to click on the button, input the information on the input fields, the first name, last name, etc., and it shows IT in the combo box. So you see, this time it worked. It managed to interact with the combo box in a different way by simulating a human clicking on the combo box, typing the option, and then clicking out. This is another way to interact with combo boxes. Ideally, you would want to use the backend API to choose options. That tends to be a lot faster, but sometimes that's not possible. In this case, as I mentioned, it really depends on how the application was developed. And again, I need to insist on this point. Automating something is a trial and error process, and you need to investigate things when things don't go as planned. Basically, what I did here is try out different parameters, try out different options to see if it worked. And in this occasion, it actually worked. So we got the department combo box dealt with. We managed to deal with that as well. We managed to solve that error. Now, our next step would be to save this new employee, right? We could just click on this button. It would work fine. But let's try something different. Let's go ahead and go back to the recorder. And you remember on our last session, we used the snipping tool to map a button and interact with it and click on it via image. There is another option as well. With the recorder open, we can press the print screen button, and that gives us a print of the current screen. From here, we actually have the same options from the snipping tool. For instance, we could map this little save button here and try to click on it using the image by right-clicking on it and click at the center of the image. As you can see, we have even more options here than in the snipping tool. We have, for instance, get text for the selected image. We have wait for image to settle inside the region. We have a lot of options here. What I want to talk about now is what exactly are the best practices to using the vision driver, whether it is with the snipping tool or with the print screen command. What are the best practices for using the vision driver to click on buttons? Well, basically, this is what you want to do. When you're trying to click on an icon, in this case, we want to click on the save button, right? What you want to do is you want to map the smallest image as possible for the click. You only want to capture in this image mapping only the minimum necessary for the click to be performed. So, for instance, in this case, we have two very similar buttons here, right? We have the save button and the save and close button. The only difference between them is that one of them has a little cross, a little red cross on it, and the other one is only the image of a disk. So, for instance, if we were to map only this area here, or the bot would not be able to identify it very well because the image is very similar, right? For instance, if we mapped only this down part here, they are exactly the same on both images. What we want to do is we want to map the area that has the most significant differences between this image and all the other parts of the interface. So if we zoom out a bit here, we can see that there is no other place on the interface that has this specific image here, the image of a disk with a red cross on top of it. So that is what we want to map. We want to map something that is as unique as possible, but we want to make it as small as possible as well. So for this specific case, I want to map that, and I'm going to also map the save word there, save ampersand. And I'm going to right click on this, click at the center of the image. And here, just like before, when we use the snipping tool, we have the asset image that was created to click on this button. Here, I'm going to leave the similarity degree at 90%. I don't want to go too low. Going low would make the bot execution faster, but as there are some images in this interface that are slightly similar to the one that we created, with the other disk image being very similar to this one, we want to leave it a little bit higher. We want to leave it as close to just 100% as possible. So we're going to leave it at 90 to make it a little bit faster, but not inaccurate. And just like before, the recorder shows the vision driver for us. So we're just going to go ahead and click Save here. We're going to close this print screen, the screen capture tool. And that would be basically it. To be able to register a new employee with this application using a bot. So let's close everything. Let's close the application. I don't want to save these changes. Let's close the recorder. We can see that the click button is here as well. So let's just start the bot and see if it can do the process from beginning to end. So we should click on the new employee button, put all the input information, choose an option in the combo box, and click on the save and close button. There we go. So if we go here to the IT department, we can see that our new employee, John Smith, has been successfully registered. We can see that John Smith is here. We can see his email that we got there. So everything worked out just fine. So as you can see, not everything went according to plan right from the get-go. We needed to be a little creative with our solutions. We needed to do some trial and error to solve some problems. And this is very common. In an ideal world, everything happens just as planned from the get-go. But unfortunately, the world is not ideal. As I mentioned before, and I need to insist on this because this is a very important topic, applications are very different between them. Depending on how they were developed, you need to be creative with how you build your automation. And that, I think, is the most important takeaway from this whole session for everyone who's watching. Automation is trial and error. Automation is investigation. Sometimes you are very lucky to find an application that was developed in a perfect way with everything very well organized in the backend, and the bot can find all the elements and interact with all the elements very fast, very quickly, very easily, but that's not usually the case. You cannot control how applications are developed, so what you need to do is you need to adapt your automation to the kind of application that you are trying to automate. Last but not least, I want to show one more feature of the recorder that is rather uncommon and unknown. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open the recorder again. So we're going to start the recorder. And we're going to map this table here with all the employees. So I have this table mapped, and let's suppose that I want to extract an email from this table. Normally that would be pretty easy. Tables can be extracted from applications by using the get table command here, but sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes, depending on the application how the application was developed, the get table command doesn't work. You cannot extract the table correctly because of how it is on the back end. In those cases, we have an option as well. We can use image grids. Now, image grids are basically used most of the time to interact with applications that cannot be interacted in any other way. You cannot use backend API. You cannot use clicking. You cannot image clicking by vision, image clicking. You cannot use anything else. So in this case, what you want to do is you go to image grid here and go to map image grid. And here we're going to go by XPath because, as usual, like I mentioned before, IDs are not reliable in this application. And as you can see, we have an image of the entire table here. What we're going to try to do here, let me maximize this. What we're going to try to do here is we're going to try to map a grid out of this image. So basically what we need to do is we need to left click on where we want each column of the grid to be at. So We're going to map this first column here, and now this column here, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So as you can see here, I'm basically manually building a table by using image grid mapping. How I can use this image grid, I can use it in many ways actually. I can use it to interact with the interface. So for instance, I want the bot to click on this email, right? But I can't do it by using the backend API because there is no XPath that leads to that specific element, for instance. So I could use the image grid to have the bot click on the image grid according to the orientation of the columns and the rows. So for instance, if I wanted to click on this first email here, this Arnold's DX email, I can ask the bot to click on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the 6th column, 3rd row. So if I tell the bot to click on my image grid on the 6th column and the row, column 6, row 3, it will find column 6, row 3 on my image grid and click on this email here, because it's going to click on this right at the center of this cell on the 3rd row of the 6th column. I can also use it to capture information. For instance, I want to capture this zip code here. I can tell the bot to get the information on column number 5, row number 3. So let's try doing that. Okay, I mapped the image grid, so everything is okay. I can save this image grid. And as you can see, it saves my image grid in with the mappings. These are the mappings of all the columns and rows in that image grid that I mapped just now. And I can save that image grid to a variable. We're just going to call that grid. Now we're going to go back here to the studio. And here we can search for grid and use the get cell value command. This command uses OCR to capture information from the image grid. So we're going to choose a language for it. The grid is the one that we saved in that variable. The row is row number 3. And the column is column number 6. We're going to try to get that first email address from the table. And it should be in this column and in this row. And for the OCR provider, we're going to use Abby. We're going to save that value to a variable to see if the bot manages to capture the information correctly. So let's name this variable just value. And then we're going to use the log message command to see if that variable captures the correct value. So let's start the bot to see if it works. So the bot should be able to do everything it did before by registering a new employee. And as you can see here, it throws us an error. It could not find the control, which in this case is the table. If you remember, the last time the bot tried to interact with this application, the window that was attached to the execution context was the new employee window. The new employee window was closed, and the image grid is actually on the main window of the application. So what we need to do for the bot to be able to identify this window and capture the grid for us, the image grid, is we need to attach this first window once more. So this is where we're going to use the attach window command. We're going to put it right before the map image grid command, and we're going to use the variable with the main app window right here to attach that window back to the execution context. So the bot knows which window we should be looking at to get the image grid. So now let's try running again and see if it works this time. So it's going to register a new employee and get the image grid for us with the value of that column. Here it is, arnolds@dxemail.com. So we managed to capture the email just fine. We also have here on our console all the previous errors that we encountered during the execution. It's very useful to have the error messages here on our output console, but remember, you can always clear the console by pressing the clear all button so it doesn't get so polluted like it is here. So that will be it for our last session on the recorder. As you can see, automation has many particularities, and things don't always work the way you expect them to work right from the get-go. So sometimes you need to get creative on how you developed your bot. Sometimes elements are not identified correctly by the bot because of how the application was developed, and you need to use alternative methods to be able to complete your objectives. This is a very broad subject. And we could encounter even more unexpected situations while developing a bot using a real application, and a real-world application that was developed God knows how. So you need to be aware of the possibilities of encountering these kinds of problems when developing your bot, and getting creative with how you use the options available to you with IBM RPA. As you can see, we managed to solve every single problem using options from IBM RPA. It provides us with many different options to automate applications, and you need to know how to use those options as well. In this series, you'll learn how to use some of them. There are even more options. IBM RPA is a very vast tool with plenty of features. So make sure to practice as much as you can with as many different kinds of applications as you can to be able to get the feeling of what kinds of options, what kinds of alternatives are the best for each situation. I hope you all learned something interesting in this series. There is still a lot more to talk about the recorder even, and also all the other features of IBM RPA. And we can always go into more details about those features in future sessions. But for now, thank you for watching. I hope you are now more knowledgeable at IBM RPA than you were when you started this recorder series, and I'll see you again in future sessions in future series. Thanks for your attention, and have a good one.